Hello and good evening, everyone, or good afternoon if you're on the West Coast. Um, Welcome to the National MAPS Committee Academic Affairs webinar series on the MCAT. This series was created to help you prepare for reaching your goal score on the MCAT. And my name is Logan Dean. I'm the current pre-medical board member, and I will be your moderator for today. I have the pleasure of being in the company of Rebekah Rogers, who is the founder of Black Roots, which is an MCAT test prep company that she founded. Rebekah, would you like to share a little bit about your background and about your company, Black Roots? Oh, we might be having some connection issues, so bear with me. Okay, we are going to pause and come back. Thank you for bearing with us, y'all. All right, sorry about that, y'all, but we're back. Technology doesn't want us to be great, but we're going to be great anyway. Rebekah, would you like to give a little bit about your background as well as a background about Black Roots, your company?
Thank you, Logan, and welcome everybody. Hello, my name is Rebekah Rogers. I am the founder and CEO and main person involved with the Black Roots at this point. I went to medical school. I graduated from college 2014. I went to medical school directly after college. I took the MCAT between my junior and senior years of school and was applying to medical school during my senior year. So I was a traditional student, which is not really a thing anymore, but I went straight through. I realized in December of 2019, I wasn't really interested in becoming a physician and practicing medicine, but I was really interested in teaching people the MCAT. And so I decided to leave medical school at that point. My intention was to go to public health school, and then the pandemic happened. And so I was immediately confronted with a whole lot of students who are about to be set back even further than they were before on their scientific learning, just access, like it was hard for every single student. And I realized over the long term how problematic this could get for diversifying medicine and creating more physicians who look like the patients that we're trying to improve health outcomes for. And so I created my own company called the Black Roots. I founded it in March 2020. And my intention is to provide culturally relevant approaches to the MCAT. I use analogies that are relevant to my life experience as well as life experiences of a lot of the students that I work with. I try to remove all of the major people who are considered discoverers of science and put you into the shoes of being the discoverer yourself, to recognize that science is ever developing, ever growing, ever changing. And I think a lot of those skills will really help you a lot on the MCAT. I've been teaching. I used to work for a third-party company teaching the MCAT, and then I started working on my own in 2020. So I've been working since 2013, about 10 years at this point. So I'm really excited to be here. I've been working with the SNMA. When I was in medical school, I was involved with the SNMA. I was MAPS liaison for 4 years. So I'm really excited to work with MAPS students. I'm really passionate about the mission of the SNMA and want to support it however I can.
Thank you so much. And of course, you know, once SMNA, always SMNA. We're a family here. So I'll go ahead and put your presentation up and I'll pass the mic back to you.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's get started, everyone. Again, my name is Rebekah Rogers. We can kind of skip the first slide because that's an intro about me. But just giving you an overview, this is what we're going to be talking about. First, intro myself, then talk a little bit about what's on the MCAT. Based on what you have already done this semester or this series, it sounds like you have had an intro to the MCAT class session itself. So we'll breeze through that pretty quickly. Spend the majority of our time talking about the common prep challenges that I've seen students experience, and as well as prep challenges I experienced myself. Some of those challenges, specifically how they relate to being a minority student in medicine. I'll talk a little bit about like what my program does, like what the Black Roots difference is, and why I think that why I really enjoy what I do. And then we'll hopefully have time. Well, we definitely will have time for Q&A. So let's get started. So about me, you see my picture. I graduated from Spelman, went to med school. I've been teaching the MCAT since 2013. I also taught the ACT before I taught the MCAT. So I have a very long history teaching standardized testing and really emphasizing the strategies around standardized testing compared to testing for schools. If you do want to contact me, my email is rebecca@thebblackroots.com. I'll put that email address back up on the slides at the very end if you all didn't have time to write it down right now. But again, if you want to email me, that's my email address. So let's just breeze through this. The MCAT in and of itself, it's 7.5 hours. You have 4 sections, 95 minutes in each section. The number of questions depends on which section you're doing because some have freestanding and the CAR section does not. So it has fewer questions than the other sections do. You have 3 breaks that you can take. They're optional, but I highly encourage students to take the breaks. And you end with a psych-soc section. You start with chem phys. So off top, just the way that MCAT is structured, I think kind of jars students. You start with chemistry and physics, and well, it's predominantly chemistry and physics. I will acknowledge there's biology and biochem in the chem phys section, so it's not just chemistry and physics. But chemistry and physics tend to be the courses in undergrad that trip students up, that provide a lot of challenges for them. I know when I was in undergrad, the worst grade on my transcript was organic chemistry, and I thought that was going to take me out of being a physician. So I totally, when I was preparing for the MCAT, I knew that I needed to get my mind right, because if I got lost in the first section, it wasn't going to be a great day. And I knew that I needed to keep it together because I would absolutely shine in the biochem section, and I had a long ways to go before I got there. So keeping your mindset throughout the entire test. And they also end with the psych-soc section. I think that that's incredibly applicable for students who are underrepresented in medicine because there's a lot of studies and a lot of research that shows that if you remind a student of their demographics or of their identity before they take a test, they tend to perform according to the stereotypes of that identity. So for example, if you told a Black man before they took the MCAT, if you made them fill out the demographics or do any kind of questions that reminded them, oh yeah, I am a Black man experiencing life in America, they might their brain might switch out of this is me just taking a test and learning the information and into, oh no, now I have to prove that I'm supposed to be here. And now I have to prove that I'm capable. And so I have to answer every single question. I need to try so much hard. And you lose all of the strategy because you're trying to prove against a stereotype instead of just taking a test. And that's something that I also provide a lot of conversations around, is how to prevent yourself from falling into that stereotype and allowing yourself to truly shine for who you are. So again, it's on a curve. There's a bunch of scores you can get. It goes from 472 to 528. The average is supposed to be a 500, but people keep switching up. And so the average is getting closer to a 501.3. That's also to say that you do not need to get a 520 to go to medical school. If you get a 520, you're in the 97th percentile, which means there's only 3% of 281,000 students. Only 3% of them did better than that score. And that's like 3% of people are not the only people going to medical school. There's a strong number of people who are not getting, even a 510 is only 22% of people. There's way more people going to medical school than that. So I also encourage you, when you're practicing and when you actually take your MCAT exam, don't count yourself out because you didn't hit your target score. It's just a score on an exam. That is one other part of a huge application that shines and tells the story of who you are and why you are meant to be a physician. It's not just the MCAT. So what the MCAT is, it's required to go to medical school for most medical schools. There are some schools that are coming against having to take the MCAT, but because the MCAT is written by the board that accredits medical schools, I don't think it's going to hit the same level of scrutiny that other standardized exams have gotten about whether or not it needs to stay. So for at least in the next 2-3 years, MCAT's going to be needed to be going to most medical schools. It is a test to assess how prepared you are to take a medical training exam and your licensing exams. The studies have shown that the higher score you get on the MCAT, the more likely you are to also score well on all of your medical licensing exams, and the more likely you are to be able to pass medical school. And so that's part of the reason that medical schools care so much about your MCAT score, is they know that this is just a precursor to all of the other exams that you're going to be taking of this caliber. And so if you can do this, we have a lot more confidence that you can get through our curriculum and it won't be an overwhelming struggle for you. And MCAT's also long and the MCAT's hard. I'm not about to pretend like it's not. For most students, this is the longest and most comprehensive test that they've taken to date. And so preparing for that becomes a completely different experience from any other prep exam or standardized exam, class exam, final exam that you've taken before. But it's not impossible. It is not a test that's only for the privileged. I think students, like you'll see statistically, students who tend to have whatever level of privilege, whether that's economic privilege, whether that's socioeconomic status, like all different aspects of privilege, students who have some aspect of privilege tend to do better on the MCAT. And I don't think that that is a coincidence. There are, like, the AAMC has done research showing that, like, the MCAT itself is not biased. The American education system is biased, and like they can't fix that. And yeah, they can't, but I don't think that that means that students should be penalized from where they started. It's really about getting to where you're trying to get to be able to go where you want to go. It's not an IQ test. It's not a test of how smart you are. It's a test of how well you can answer these specific questions. There's all kinds of stuff they don't test on the MCAT that is also incredibly relevant to like being a good physician. But this is just a test of certain things to make sure that you can pass a medical licensing exam. It's not a memory game. The older versions of the MCAT used to be a lot more about just rote memorization because doctors didn't have Google. We have Google now, as well as other things on the internet, and so we don't need to memorize everything. This test is a lot more about analysis, being able to eliminate incorrect answers, understanding why you're eliminating something is incorrect. It's not always based on your content knowledge. Sometimes it's like, oh, these two answers are saying the exact same thing. It can't be either one of those. And getting to a level of confidence of this is just strategically taking a test. I'm not necessarily having to perform according to my memory. And it's not a reflection of your capacity to become a physician. Your timeline to take the MCAT is probably going to be different than most everybody else's timeline to taking the MCAT, and that's okay. Your individual experiences, your life journey is the reason that you are going to be an impactful physician with your patients. And I don't want students to think that their life experiences or where they came from is somehow all of a sudden a detriment. Like that is absolutely what's going to make you the best physician to communicate and connect with your patients at the end. And the more that you can keep that in mind, I hope that that encourages you to get through the hurdles and the humps of actually preparing to take the MCAT. So again, ChemPhys, 59 questions, 95 minutes. There's 2 concepts. I will also acknowledge that the foundational concepts on the AAMC, they're not necessarily like 2 concepts means there's less material to know. Like foundational concept 5 is like 5A through H, and then 4 is like 4A through L or something. Whereas the psych-soc concepts, it'll be like A through C for like 5 concepts. So don't assume just because there's fewer concepts, less is covered. There is math kind of on the MCAT, but if you do have questions about how math is applied on the MCAT, we can absolutely discuss that. There's not calculus, I'll tell you that much, but there are other ways in which math can help you, especially because you do not get to use a calculator. Yay. After the ChemPhys section, you take the CAR section. The CAR section, critical analysis reasoning skills. Most students think of this as like an English section. It's not an English section at all. It is analyzing. I make the CAR section analogous to a patient interview because, again, this is preparing you to be a physician. So being able to write extensively is not necessarily a skill that a physician needs. It's helpful, but it's not a necessary skill. Whereas being able to analyze a lot of words and get to a diagnosis is something a physician has to be able to do. And so getting to the diagnosis is answering those questions. And so a lot of my work through the CAR section is teaching students about like, this is a patient interview. If you are going to be an effective physician, this is how you should structure your patient interviews. And when you get to medical school, you'll understand why you're structuring your patient interviews in a certain way. Then you have the biochem section. It's another 3 concepts. Again, concept does not mean how small or extensive the amount of information is required, but it's also about creating narratives, not necessarily memorizing the content. So the questions aren't going to ask you like, okay, here's delta H, here's T and delta S, what is delta G, or anything like that. It's going to be a lot more complex where you have to understand why delta G exists in the first place. Like, what is Gibbs free energy? What makes up temperature? What is heat? What is energy? Like all of those things will be summed up into being able to answer this question. And so that's where it gets complicated for students to apply the concepts, is because they think that it's this one concept, and in reality, it was asking this concept over here. So being able to figure out what exactly is being asked and where do I need to go and get more of a foundation can be challenging for students. There's also like more and more, I'm seeing math and physics type of questions popping up on the biochem section. And so you may end up still, aside from the ChemPhys section, this may be another section where you end up having to do math or use some type of physics. Your self-identity also will play into how your strategies are for this section. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I know for myself, like biology is what I do well. It was my major in undergrad. My mom was a biologist. Biology is my jam. So I knew when I got to the bio and biochem section, like that was where I was going to shine. So the strategies that I applied in this section were based on what I knew about myself leading into this section, whereas ChemPhys was way more about like Stay calm, stay calm, stay calm. You're fine. It's fine. You're fine. It's fine. Stay calm, stay calm. It's almost over. It's almost over. And then I got to biochem and I was like, yeah, it was still really hard. Like, don't get me wrong, but I absolutely felt more confident and prepared for this section compared to other sections. And you don't have to perform equally well in each section. The person who wants to be a neurologist is not going to want to be an OB-GYN. Like, there are all kinds of different parts of medicine and everyone has different passions for different reasons. So medical schools know this. And when they're looking at your application, it's not just, oh, they did this well and this well and this well. They're really thinking like, is this person ready to be a physician? Do they understand what it is to be a physician? If they think they want to be a neurologist, are they open to switching to OB-GYN? Are you aware that like you still have to try all of the other things? Those are all of the aspects that come into when they're assessing your application beyond just your MCAT score. And then you have the psych-social section. This one, again, like I said, it covers 5 concepts. So it seems like a lot more information. And this is the one section where I will say memorization helps a little bit more, just because there are some questions where it's literally, you know this definition or you don't. And if you don't, you're not going to do well on it. And at the same time, students, because it is so based on memorization, students tend to do the best in this section, just on average. This average score is the highest average score of any of the sections. So the MCAT writers are also trying to make this section more complicated, more difficult in all kinds of different ways. So don't be fazed if you end up seeing an MCAT style question or a question that requires you to do math in this section as well. Their MCAT's trying to make the whole thing equally difficult because students are just getting better. And that's how that goes. So, okay. The most common challenges, the first challenge that I see a lot of students have is motivation. I separate these challenges into preparation challenges versus test day challenges. Some of them are obviously going to apply on both sections, but I do think there is a difference in the types of challenges that students experience. So motivation, like picking yourself up, like yesterday, I didn't do nothing. I didn't want to do nothing yesterday. My grandma died yesterday. I got evicted from my house yesterday. My tire went flat yesterday. Like, for whatever reason, yesterday was not a great day. I don't want to do today. And getting yourself to a space of, I can try today, like, that is so challenging for students. So getting to a space of consistently being motivated, even if it's like, I'm motivated to do something in the MCAT today. I have a lot of stuff that I got to get through, so I'm not about to do like 10 passages today, but I can do 3 questions. And let's just start there and we'll move on from that afterwards. Making yourself get to a space of like consistent motivation. This is where having peer accountability tends to help students with their motivation. If you know somebody else is also studying for the MCAT while you're studying for the MCAT, you can talk to each other and be like, I don't want to do this right now. I don't want to do it either. Okay, so we're both going to do it for 5 minutes and then we'll come back and see how we feel. And then you feel like you have a little bit, like, misery loves company is the old adage or whatever. And I think that is true to a certain extent, of like, students really do better with their motivation when they're not doing it in an isolated space, when they have other people doing it with them. Beyond that, there's also focus. So you can have all the motivation in the world, and then you open a book and you start thinking about the birds outside, or you start thinking about this test that you have coming up, or you start thinking about your work tomorrow. There's so many other things that can take you out of what you're supposed to be doing right now, staying focused on the task at hand, that tends to be very challenging for students. One thing that I recommend students do is set a timer for themselves. It's sometimes referred to as a Pomodoro method because it's like literally a tomato timer. But the idea behind it is to set a timer for yourself where, okay, so for 20 minutes, I'm going to do this one task. I'm not going to be on my phone. I'm not going to be anywhere else but on this one task. And I know that in 20 minutes, I can give myself a break and do whatever else I want to do. So students will set that timer. Maybe they get 17 minutes in, but they're getting some amount of work done. Getting to a space where obviously you have to be able to do at least 95 minutes by the time you take the MCAT of straight focus. but you have to start somewhere, and students aren't always ready to start at 95 minutes. So getting to a space of like, okay, I have this expectation of myself, but I'm here. So like, I'm not about to do this. I have to like go like this and incrementally get yourself there, giving yourself grace to fail, make mistakes, be like, actually today I'm just gonna be on my phone all day, and allowing that or not allowing that, self-discipline and self-grace, figuring out what the balance is for yourself. Everyone's going to be different in how they balance the two of those things. Beyond that, consistency. So going back to motivation, it's like I was motivated today and then I lost it tomorrow. Getting yourself to a space where every single day you are still motivated. You want to try, you want to try, you want to try. And that consistency is not based on how you feel about today. I know I don't feel like doing this, but that's not why I'm showing up. There's going to be so many days when you're in medicine and medical school as a physician where you don't feel like getting up. And there are people whose lives are on the line, whether you get up or not. So being consistent is not about how you feel. It's about getting the job done because it needs to get done. Retain the info. A lot of students will, like the amount of information you have to know the MCAT is vast. And a lot of students get to a space of getting overwhelmed with retaining it. It's like, okay, I put all this in and then something slipped out. Okay, I put it back in and this slipped out. Okay, I put them both in and then something slipped out. Like getting to a space where you're able to retain that information predominantly through spaced repetition. That's one thing that I do think that the MCAT style questions help a lot with is, oh, this question was asking about acids and bases and thermodynamics and protein structure. So now I am reminding myself of all three of those things by testing myself with this question. And that's also why I encourage students to start doing questions as soon as possible, because that's really how you're going to retain the information that needs to be applied. And you're also going to be able to filter through the information that like you don't need to keep anymore, which leads into applying it effectively. So you can have a whole bunch of stuff in your head and then you're like, oh, wait, okay, but I know acids and bases, but why is it asking this question like this? Like my teacher never asked it like this. There's so many ways that the MCAT is like, we know that your teachers taught you like this. We know these are the questions that you had in your other classes. So we're going to trick you and we're going to make you think that this is exactly how you should do it. And then that's going to be the wrong answer. And then you get frustrated because you're like, bro, I thought I at least knew that. And they're like, no, did you not read this one word? And you're like, seriously? This entire test is because I didn't read a word. Are you serious right now? But when you're diagnosing a patient, reading one lab result wrong could be the difference between whether or not that patient gets the right diagnosis and is able to go on to live a healthy, fruitful, productive life or not. So the details matter a lot in getting yourself to a space of, I can apply this information, but I'm also making sure that I'm looking for the details tends to be where that combination of retaining and applying like that sweet spot. A challenge during preparation is often confidence. Is like, okay, like, especially because now that I'm on the other side and I've already learned the MCAT, students will tend to look at me like, okay, but you already know all of this stuff. Like you've already gone through this process. So duh, it's easy for you. And it's like, that's not why I'm doing what I do. A lot of the development of confidence comes from you being able to put yourself in the driver's seat. And so I tell students often, like, my goal is to be irrelevant to you. My goal is to give you all the tools for you to be able to do this without me. I know that if you're always using me as a crutch, you're never going to be able to get it where you feel like you're able to do it on your own. But I also know the value of having a resource that you think is where you want to go and being able to use that resource to get where you're trying to go. So developing confidence is not something that just comes naturally to most students, but it is a skill that is going to be necessary for you to develop, not just for the MCAT, but also when you're working with patients. If the patient's second guessing you, you have to know why you said what you said and stand on that. Whether or not you fully understand why you said what you said, having the confidence that, no, I truly believe this. If I'm wrong, I can go back and check later. But I'm right now in this moment, this is what I believe. And that tends to spend 5-10 minutes doing one question. Is they get it narrowed down to 50-50. And then they're like, yes, no, yes, no. And it could be yes or no. But also, this is a standardized test. This question does not mean anything more. It's not any more valuable than any of the other questions that you answered in 25 seconds. So why are you here so long? Getting confidence, that it is okay to not know what you don't know. And allow yourself to be like, I'll learn that later. When I left the MCAT, there was absolutely a question that I was like, in the moment, I was like, it's one of the two of these. I don't know, but if I keep sitting here, I'm about to mess myself up for the rest of the test. And as soon as I left the test, I was like, oh, I chose the wrong one. But I didn't allow that to make me get derailed for the rest of the test. Getting to a space of like, I'm still confident that I did so well on the rest of those questions that one question wasn't about to take me off. I know I can do better next time, but that one question isn't about to be the make or break of me becoming a physician. It's not all down to one question, ever. Beyond that, stamina. This test, like I said, is 7.5 hours, and that does not come easily to most people to sit and focus and think about science at this level for 7.5 hours. That happens over time by developing stamina. Similar to running a marathon, you don't do that overnight. You don't do that in a week. Well, most people don't prepare for a marathon in a week. You have to like build yourself to run a marathon, and getting yourself to recognize, I have to develop my stamina. I'm not going to just wake up and have stamina one day. I actually have to like try to make that happen, is also a challenge when students are preparing. And then the last challenge that I tend to see students have is creating the time to study. I know that especially if you are holding positions in other organizations, or if you are also in school, whether that's undergrad or some sort of a graduate school, whether you're in a post-bac, or if you're just trying to have a full-time job to get enough money to sustain yourself to be able to eventually get to medical school. There's so many things that can complicate your ability to have time to study. And it always is going to come down to, did you create time or no? Time is not going to just magically pop up, especially if you know that you're a high achieving or somebody, a student who does a lot of different things in a lot of different spaces, like you're holding a lot of hats. You're not going to have a lot of free time. Like, that's off top. And that is what medical schools like to see, is students who do a lot of things, who have a lot of hats that they're juggling at the same time, because they know that when you get to medical school, you're going to be able to do all of the things required, and you still might be able to give something back and make this a better institution. The schools, they want to also know that you're ready to improve them as a school. As good as that school is, why are you making that school better? And one of those things comes down to, do you know how to have time for what you're trying to do? Do you create the time for what you're trying to do? Is time available? There are also moments when you have to realize, like, this year is not a good year for me to start medical school because all of these other things are more pressing matters than I need my time to be able to do them. That you have to be able to recognize, when should I apply to medical school? When do I have time? If you're recognizing, I don't even have time to study for the MCAT right now, and I don't have a timeline of when this is going to be over, that might be a sign to you that this is not the time for you to study. I do not encourage that students are studying for the MCAT longer than a year maximum. Recognizing, obviously, if you have to take it again, or other things happen, or you start and then you stop and then you start again, that timeline might extend. But if we're talking about you maintaining consistency, you retaining information, you having confidence, you keeping stamina for over a year, like, I mean, maybe, but like, why are you trying to do this to yourself? You're about to have to do all of that when you get to medical school anyways. So can you create the time, the structure, the space in your life now to be able to do that, where when you get to med school, it's not as overwhelming how much of your time has to be spent preparing for your medical school exams? So beyond the preparation challenges, there are also test day challenges. One of the major test day challenges being pacing, where students they'll be on track, and then they'll get one question. They're like, I'm gonna just 5 more seconds, 20 more seconds, 2 more minutes. And then 10 minutes have gone by and they're still doing one question. That the recognition, every single question is like, I have this much time. And getting yourself aware of time passing and not allowing yourself to just stay in the thought process. That's a lot of what this test is testing. When you're a physician, like, some of your decisions are going to have to be point blank decisions that you're just making in the moment. And if you think too long about it, you might make the wrong decision. You might make a better decision, but you also might have cost somebody an aspect of their quality of life because of that amount of time that you spent thinking. If you're thinking about oxygen to the brain, every second counts. So if you're taking 25 extra seconds to think about what we're going to do about getting oxygen to the brain, meanwhile, this person's not getting oxygen to their brain, we have a problem. So pacing is not just about, oh, how many questions can I answer and how good am I at doing this? It's also about, like, when you're a physician, some things do have to happen in an emergency. And I also want to take a note to talk about students who have extended time and what that means in terms of pacing, because I don't want students who have extended time to start thinking that they can't think as fast as other people. That's not the challenge. I've worked with students who've had extended time and they're still go on to be effective, excellent physicians. It's in this moment, what other things have you also had to deal with that might make it take an extra minute for you to get through? Those could be life experiences. If you've experienced trauma, especially educational or academic trauma, you may have to every single question be doing an extra deep breath to think like, I can do this. I can do this. And that might make you need extra time. It could also be just the way your brain works is not compatible with the way medicine has been constructed. And so it takes an extra second for your brain to adjust to the way that this construction has happened. It's not to say that your brain's working weird or your brain's not working the right way. This is one way. Your brain does another way. So maybe it needs more time to just make that bridge happen. When you're actually out in the field doing medicine, those challenges may go away. This is just one aspect to get you to be a doctor. And so if you need extra time to get through those questions, give yourself that extra time. This is the beginning. And I will also say that those challenges that you're experiencing now may get harder as you go through medicine. Not saying it may get harder when you're working with patients. I think there's a difference between the structure and the construct of medicine and individually working with patients. The construct of medicine is like, you need to look like this. You have to act like this. Your hair has to be like this. You have to be a robot. And your patients are like, we don't like robots though. So if you know you're already going to be in this space of I'm bridging the gap where medicine is not constructed for who I am and my patients want me to not be constructed according to medicine, it may take your brain an extra second. Like you're having to literally do another layer of thought that other people aren't having to do. That's okay. Allow yourself to know I might need extra time to get through these questions. It's perfectly fine. Mindfulness, in addition to staying focused on the exam, having mindfulness. So like I was saying, like, I'm cool. I'm fine. It's fine. It's fine. Staying aware of how your mental state is in every single question and not giving into that feeling, allowing yourself to come out of that, rationalizing, calming yourself down, whatever it is, and also recognizing what are the things that happen early on in your body that are making you feel anxious. So I know for me, I did cognitive behavioral therapy, which a lot of what we did was figuring out, okay, we would go through experiences that I've had in the past and describe those experiences in detail. And then at some point in that experience, I would physically shake, or I would start tapping on things, or I would start shifting my attention to a lot of different spaces. Those are things that I was able to recognize are my escape mechanisms when I'm feeling unsafe in a space and I want to leave. So I recognized, okay, I can either allow myself to leave or I can come up with some type of coping mechanism to allow myself to stay because I know that I'm okay in this space. And so as soon as I start seeing my leg tap, remind myself I'm safe, assess why my leg is even tapping. If that means I need to move on from this question, I will move on from the question. But getting yourself to a space of mindfulness where maybe it's not at the level of I've gone through cognitive behavioral therapy, but maybe you have done some, I recognize that I'm starting to think about flowers. That's when I know I'm off and I need to do something else. Getting more aware of that, and the sooner in that I'm derailed that you can self-correct, the more time you'll have left to still continue on with the exam. So getting to a space of mindfulness is absolutely important. And that's also something that I start every single class doing some activity around mindfulness to help students center themselves for what we're going to be doing for the day, because that also doesn't come overnight. That comes with a lot of practice. Beyond that, one of the testing challenges tends to be preparation. Students will go into the test. I have seen so many students say, I'm going to just give this a shot. I'll just try it and we'll see what happens. And it's like, that's not how you do the MCAT. The schools are going to see every single score you take. So it is to your best benefit to only take the MCAT when you feel fully prepared. That preparation could also be you trying it. You tried it this way. You actually realize like, this isn't going very well, but like, I got to keep pushing. We got to keep trying. And then you get the score and you're like, wow, I actually can apply to medical school with that score. It's not actually the score that I was trying to get, but I'm not out of the woods of trying to apply. Getting to a space of, am I what level of preparation have I given this? Be honest with yourself. Did I try as much as I could, or could I have given more? I know when I took the MCAT, I probably could have given more. I wasn't about to spend another day doing any kind of prep for the MCAT. I had given it my all. I had done my best, and I wanted to leave it all on the table. I was also flying on vacation the next day, so I didn't have time to spend any time extra, and I had already paid for my flight and paid for where I'm about to stay. So I'm for sure about to make sure that I have my life together to be able to get through this so I can go on to the next. And getting yourself to that level of preparation will make you just more confident going into the exam for sure. Beyond that, resilience. So like if you get through one of the sections and you're like, that section went horrible, like horrible, that is not going to count you out from being a physician. I've seen it all the time where one section students tank, but the other 3 sections they did so well that it actually shows medical schools like that they've got some level of resilience that they were able to pick themselves back up after that and get that score afterwards. Like they probably have some level of resilience. So getting to a space of like, I can do this. It might have gotten wrong, but that doesn't mean I'm counted out. Whatever that confidence needs to be for you is so important, especially as it relates to that test day. And then a strategy, which is why most of us are here. Having a strategy of these are the types of questions that I know that I tend to spend way too much time doing. If I see these types of questions, I'm not answering these questions. When I say strategy, I don't mean this generalized strategy of this is how you answer a question. This is how you do this. My strategy, when I'm talking about developing your individualized strategy, it's based on knowing yourself. So if you know physics is not it, you put yourself at 90 seconds to do any physics question. After that 90 seconds is up, you choose an answer and move on with your life, because none of these questions are about to make or break you. And if you spend too long doing physics, you know that every single time you get lost and then you end up missing 5 or 6 questions at the end that you could have answered pretty easily because you got lost on this one physics question. Happens all the time. The test is written a certain way because it knows what students are like. It literally observes 281,000 students every single year, if not more. So getting yourself to what is my individualized strategy, and that strategy could be different for each individual section. So you could say for the chem phys section, I'm just trying to get through. I don't really have a strategy here. I'm just not spending more than 90 seconds on a question. That's my strategy for chem phys. For cars, my strategy is I'm not going back to this passage. Once I've taken my notes, I'm going on to answer these questions. I'm not spending any time going back. Every time I go back, that's where I waste time, and then I miss easy questions. So really developing a strategy based on these are the questions that I'm missing because of what I was doing here, and analyzing your practice exams. All of that will help develop your individualized strategy. And I want to leave enough time to have questions for you, to have time for you to ask questions about your own strategies. So I will leave it there. As it relates to my company, what I do, I approach this in 5 steps, where first we learn the test like we just did. We talk about all the sections. We talk about the foundational concepts. I introduce you to all the things that are going to be happening for you. And then I have students go through learning yourself. So let's go through these foundational concepts. Which of these concepts do you feel confident in? Which of these concepts do you feel like you're going to have a little bit more of a challenge approaching or getting through? And let's address that situation now. Maybe that means we need to start by developing your confidence. So we'll start by just brushing up on the things you already know so you feel confident going in. For some students, that might mean let's just start with your areas for improvement, and then we can get to a space where we're all at an equal level of needing to improve, and then we can choose what we want to actually do better on, because it's going to be based on you as a person. It's also, let's assess your academic history, whether that's how well did you do in a class, not necessarily the grade you got, because teachers are all over the place, but how did you do in the class? Did you retain the information? You might have gotten an A in chemistry, and do you know what an acid or a base is? Being able to be honest with yourself about, I know I did well and that got me here, but it's not going to get me to the next. And understanding that the person you were is not the person that you will be when you start medical school. And this is the bridge. What are the things that I need to do to bridge from this to that? If I know I want to be a physician, once I go into medical school, the accelerator is on to being a physician. Like, you are in the pipeline and you are about to be there. So you don't have as much time to assess okay, these are the things that I wanted to get back and get through. You're in it now. So this is the time to really address those things before you're actually in medical school. Beyond that, learning the content. So absolutely recognizing that there is content that needs to be learned. And I have recognized both from my own life experience as well as from the majority of the experiences of my students is that a lot of the challenge in retaining the information is because it was not applicable to their own lives. So if you think about like the plum pudding model of an atom, like plum pudding sounds nasty to me. And I also don't know what plum pudding looks like. So telling me the plum pudding model of an atom says nothing to me. But if you would say the gumbo model of an atom, I got you. Or if you say the chocolate chip model of an atom, I got you. Content in a way that actually makes sense to the life experiences you already have. Some of that will come by analogies that I provide, but I also challenge students to come up with their own analogies, come up with their own ways to make it relative to their life experiences, because the more that you're able to relate it to something else, whether that's, one of my students just told me a whole thing about like she tracks electrons by like The Office, and like Michael likes lopsided boobs. I don't watch The Office, so it makes no sense to me. But she was describing it and she was laughing about it and it made full sense to her. And I told it to one of my friends who's not in medicine at all. He does just very different things. I told him about this analogy because he also watches The Office. And he was like, that actually makes sense. That's actually hilarious. And he started laughing. So that also gives me more confidence that, okay, she was onto something there. And that is, I feel so much more confident that what she has used as an analogy is going to get her through. And it's not something I gave her. I gave her the tools to be able to do it for herself, but she came up with that analogy on her own. My intent here is to get you to a space where you don't need me, where you're able to learn the tools that I am giving you and give them to yourself. After learning the content, it's all about learning the strategy. So going back to, how do I do this? Why are these the problems? Where am I going wrong? How do I do this better? That is all of the strategy. And then beyond that, it's becoming a physician. So I really want to embrace that what I provide for students is not just preparing you for the MCAT, it's preparing you for the MCAT and beyond, like becoming a physician. When I was in medical school, I got depression. I ended up suicidal. And I know those were not things I was prepared for when I was at pre-med. I thought that I would be fine. Like I thought everything would be fine. And nobody had really spent the time to talk to me about how to prevent that experience from happening or things to do if I did start feeling like that. I just went straight into the depths of feeling like that because I was like, there's no way I feel like this. This can't happen. I'm just going to pretend it's not happening. And it was actively happening. And so a lot of the things that I wasn't necessarily aware of in medicine and that I know that you're also being exposed to by being involved with the SNMA are things that I also emphasize through what I do. Teaching you about like life experiences that are not just going to help for the MCAT, but are also going to help when you are a physician. Mindfulness is not about to just drop off once you take the MCAT. You're absolutely going to be needing that mindfulness tips in all of the subsequent exams that you're going to be taking. The three things that I offer one-on-one tutoring that's available 24/7. If you are interested in doing tutoring and the price point itself is a challenge for you, please email me and we can discuss potential ways that we can work together. I'm also hosting a group class. I focus predominantly on teaching students the strategies of students who have previously prepared for the MCAT, whether that means they prepared for 2 months and then they stopped, but they've at least done some of the content, or if that means they've prepared, they've taken the MCAT 3 times and they don't have another chance. They have to take it, they have to do well now. Those are the students that I work the best with, but I'm the most specialized to work with because I understand a lot more of this is requiring you to get a strategy down. It's not about developing the content. And so I offer a boot camp, which is heavily focused on strategies for individual students. I meet with the students individually throughout the boot camp. I analyze all of their practice exams. I really work with them to figure out where is the gaps in your strategy. What can we address? How can we get you to actually being ready for the MCAT? And so the boot camp that I'm about to be starting will start February 25th. It's going to run for 6 weeks. The expectation is that students are showing up. I have actual in-person classes for students twice a week, and then I meet with them once a week in addition to that. And then there are daily assignments for the students to do. But I also recognize that every student is on a different schedule. And so I try to develop a schedule for you. And also every student isn't trying to get a 520 on the MCAT. So I tend to work with students to develop their own study schedule that's going to be for the outcomes that they desire, and not just developing this traditional standardized program. We do some lectures predominantly about like thermodynamics, enzymes, acids, and bases, because those are like very high yield topics. And those tend to be where students have reviewed and they think they know it. And then they get a question. They're like, I cannot review this another time. I don't know what else I'm missing here. So I go through and really break down those specific topics, because I think that also helps like ease some of the tension and other things that they may be having challenges with. But that's how the boot camp works. And then I also offer a self-study program. You have access to the program for 12 months. You can also buy a monthly subscription for the self-study. And then in addition to that, I host weekly check-ins. So I know like self-study, going back to the whole accountability thing, like misery loves company. I strongly believe that even if you are doing self-study, you need to have some space where you can connect with other people who are also studying for the MCAT. And so I host weekly check-ins. It's just via Zoom. You drop in if you want to. You're not required to attend, but it is to allow students to ask questions about what they're going through, and also just commiserate, whether that's talking about the halftime show at the Super Bowl, or if that's talking about this specific passage that all of them did and none of them did well. Allowing them to have space to discuss that is the other thing that I offer. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to pull up the slide with my email address in case you didn't have time to see that. And I wanted to open it up for any questions you all may have.
Thank you so much, Rebekah, for that. I do have Rebekah's email scrolling on the ticker on the bottom of the screen for those who would like to jot down her email. There were a few questions in the chat. The first one is from Michaela, and she says, I find I'm spending 12 plus hours studying and wasting time. Do you have any tips for increasing the biochem bio section and the chemistry physics section? She has a test in May for the MCAT.
Thanks for your question, Michaela. Yeah, that's exactly to the point of figuring out how to study your time effectively is so important. And I don't know exactly what you mean by wasting time. I think that 12 plus hours studying could be very effective if you are structuring that time out correctly. So I would encourage you to, instead of giving yourself just, I'm going to study now for 5 hours, put chunks of what you're going to be doing for that 5 hours. If it's 2 hours, create chunks for what you're going to be doing for those 2 hours, but actually split it up and focus on doing questions. Don't allow yourself to get set. It gets really comfortable to read a book. Like, it's real comfortable to read a book, but that's not actually going to make you better at answering a question. So forcing yourself, like, okay, I read this book. It's been 20 minutes. I have to answer some questions about what I just read. Even if this goes horribly, I still have to answer these questions. Forcing yourself into that next level is going to be really important for you. And also, if you recognize, like, I'm not engaging, take off. Like, there's nobody forcing you to have to study right now. And so if you recognize you're not in the right mind or the right space to get into that right space. I know for myself, I work really well in early mornings and late evenings, but I live in Los Angeles. And so the way the weather works, I don't want to work when the sun is out. I don't want to do it. And so I have created my life where I'm fine with being up at 5:30, getting work done from 5:30, 6 o'clock until 10 o'clock, hanging out with my nephew from 10 o'clock until 3 o'clock, coming home at 3 o'clock, and then doing work from 3 o'clock till 7, 8 o'clock at night. It also works because I tutor, and most students aren't even available to tutor during the middle of the day. So I have the middle of my day available to do whatever I want to do. But I know that means I don't necessarily get to hang out with my friends every evening. And that's fine with me, like very fine with me. I know that what I'm doing is necessary and beneficial to get me where I'm trying to go. If you want any other clarification, please put another thing in the comment.
Thank you for that. I don't see another one yet. There are a few comments, which I'll just pop up because they're good affirmations. Someone said that you're awesome. You had some good comments like, that's dope. Your quotes, quotable. It's about getting the job done because it needs to get done, period. And oh, there is a question. Where can we learn more about the monthly sub?
Yeah, so if you go to theblackroots.com, I'm gonna drop it in the chat, but maybe Logan can also scroll that through. If you just go to theblackroots.com and press on click the products, you should be able to see the 3 options available and be able to go into the monthly subscription.
All right, and I do have a few questions since we have a few minutes left. My question is, what are some effective strategies for building critical thinking skills while studying for the MCAT?
So I think critical thinking is something that it's very nebulous as a word. I feel like thinking critically is more just about analyzing things and figuring out what doesn't work. And so one of the most effective ways to build that skill in and of itself is to do it on a low pressure space to then apply it in a different space. So I encourage students to read journal articles, for example, of things that you're already interested in. Maybe you're doing research on something or you want to do research on something in the future. Read articles that are about whatever topic you're interested in and figure out what is wrong with this research. Every research paper could be done better. Whether that was the demographics, something about that research could be better. They'll even discuss in the discussion how they could improve this research later. So you being able to analyze research articles is also one of the most heavily tested skills on the MCAT that is under discussed, but being able to analyze charts, analyze tables, analyze graphs, understand what's going on. Scientists are making up stuff all the time, especially on research papers. So being able to figure out what's going on with that, I think is one of the easiest and most effective ways to build a critical thinking skill. I think another way is doing questions of absolutely, like getting to a space of, these are the reasons that I'm incorrectly answering questions. These are the things that I'm doing wrong. I also encourage you all to have some type of an error log. If you do, I have an error log template. So if you would like my error log, I can send that to you. But have some type of an error log where you're tracking, and it doesn't have to necessarily be every single question. I think that the chem phys and the biochem sections tend to be the sections that are the most challenging for students when it comes to critical thinking skills. So at least when you're doing passages of those, if that's when you do practice exams, doing an error log for your practice exam in some way, analyzing what you have already done and logging it, because then you'll start to see patterns like, oh, 150 times I didn't read a detail. I think that's my problem here. But you wouldn't have seen that if you're just every single time, oh, I missed that detail, oh, I missed that detail. And then you see it 150 times, it's different.
Thank you. That was very detailed for me, and a good strategy that to take away, because like you said, and like we were speaking about earlier, sometimes you just get an explanation. It was like, duh, this was the right answer. You're like, dang, I really don't know what you're trying to tell me. So being able to track yourself sounds like a great way for you, like as the person that is studying, to identify your own mistakes. And I have one more question since I don't see any in the chat. If anybody has any last minute burning questions, please drop them in the chat and I'll put it on the screen. But the next question is, how can students best balance content review with their practice questions and full-length exams during their MCAT preparation?
So I think that it depends on like what phase. I think that it's becoming more common to talk about like the phases of MCAT prep, where it's kind of the content review, the middle phase where you're kind of balancing content and questions, and then the final phase where you're just doing questions or predominantly doing questions and drilling that out. So if we're talking about, if you're just in the content phase, I don't think you should be doing practice questions. I think that that's just going to demoralize you. It's going to make you disappointed in yourself, and it's just not the space for that. Allow yourself to have time to like, I'm learning. I think that for some students, they get stuck in the content review phase. And so for some students, you need to just be doing questions. Even if you know you're about to get every single question wrong, that's fine. One thing that my self-study program does is there are questions built into all of the modules. So like you don't get to just read content. Like you're answering a question. It's a multiple choice question in the middle of the module that you got to answer right now. So that forces students to like, it's not an MCAT level question of having to analyze and all this kind of stuff, but it is, are you synthesizing the information? Are you analyzing? Are you thinking about it as you're going through the content phase? When you're doing practice questions, I think students often will go through a set of practice questions and be like, okay, I don't know amino acids, and then go do amino acids for 2 days. Like that's, if you know you are in the balance of content and questions, this is not time for you to spend a day doing questions, like at all. It should never be more than half of whatever time period that you're spending reviewing the content. And honestly, should be about a third. The majority of your time should be spent doing the passages and reviewing what you did not do well on the passages themselves, and then reading the content or reviewing the content to supplement that.
Thank you so much, Rebekah. I know we're over. Are you okay with taking one more? One came in the chat. Okay. So from the chat, is there a content review source that has a topic not covered in a comprehensive source like Kaplan books that we should be looking at? So basically, what other resources should we be using for content review is what I'm understanding the question to say.
Can you repeat your rephrasing?
Yeah. So what other resources should we be using for content review is how I'm understanding
Got
this
it.
question.
So I don't feel anything is gold standard. I don't think Kaplan books, I don't think print review books. I don't think any company does it excellently. That's kind of why I have the company that I have, but I also don't think I do it perfectly. I give so many students so many resources to other things because I'm just a way to get you there. I'm not the final thing. And I think that tends to be very frustrating for students is they want something to be like, this is the end all be all for the MCAT. And like, when I was in medical school, somebody just let me be in charge of writing science. We'd be fine. Like I just need to be in charge of completely redoing science and then we'll be fine. But science is always changing, always growing, always developing. And so something could be comprehensive today and then completely wrong tomorrow. So there's never going to be anything that is comprehensive. Even if something is saying it's comprehensive MCAT, they've done the 10 foundational concepts, but that one article that came out today that they haven't read means it's no longer comprehensive. So I think that if you are recognizing what the things that you're using right now aren't getting you there, that is when Google becomes your best friend and you're going to have to really get good at reading journal articles to answer things. The NCBI has something called Stat Pearls, I believe it's called. But like the national, I don't know what NCBI, it's like the governmental research people. They have something intentionally for like every topic in medicine. They have like a stat. Yeah, it's called Stat Pearls. And it's like, if you are a physician, this is the physician level understanding of anything you want to talk about. So if that's type 1 diabetes, if that's the pancreas, if that's islet cell, whatever you want to talk about it, they've got a Stat Pearls version for it. So I highly, highly, highly encourage you, if you want to find the most comprehensive, go straight to it. Yeah. And the link that Logan just dropped is the link to the Stat Pearls. So yeah, you can scroll that, like that list. I'm still scrolling, I'm still in the A's. So that list is very comprehensive for anything that you might want to look at.
I lost my mic. Thank you so much. I'm copying and pasting the link right now into the comments for the people who are like, she didn't drop anything in there. Give me 1 second. But thank you so much, Rebekah, for spending time with us and having this very thorough conversation. And here's a link to the Stat Pearls, y'all. Hopefully that works. We greatly appreciate your time. So thank you again for being with us and giving us that overview of how to approach the MCAT.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. And it was a pleasure to see you or to present this to you all. If you have any questions, please email me.
All right. I still have the ticker going on the bottom. If you would like to shoot Rebekah an email. Let me take down my other one too. Bear with me.
No worries.
Okay, here we go. Yay. Okay, so my closing out remarks, y'all. Thank you again for being here. And thank you to our speaker for supporting the SMNA and our pre-medical students who are here tonight. If you're interested in checking out Rebekah's MCAT services, again, the link is on the ticker that's scrolling across the bottom. So screenshot or write it down, whatever you need to do so you can get in contact with her. Please be in tune for additional webinars. We have a few more webinars focusing on the MCAT. I think our next webinar is Sunday at 3, and we will be starting to go into practice questions. So doing walkthroughs through practice questions as a group. That's free to attend. So please go register. It's on our Instagram, and our Facebook, and our Twitter, and everything else we have to go register for that webinar. Remember, we have a few MCAT resources through SMNA if you are a national member, a national dues paying member. And also, if you're part of a MAPS chapter or a local SMNA chapter, please ask your regional leadership and your chapter leadership what discounts they may also have. They might be unique to your location or your university. And lastly, I want to share that I am super excited to see y'all at AMAC 2024 in New Orleans. It's going to be super fun. And if you are not aware, AMAC is our annual medical education conference. It's hosted in a different city each year. And this year, like I mentioned, is in New Orleans from March 27th through March 31st. For any other updates, please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the things at National SMA Maps. Thank you for joining us and have a great night, y'all.
Bye.
Sorry. This is awkward, but